Hi, my name's Cressida, and I was the quiet one in my family, the one they never mentioned, unless it was to laugh at. At my sister's wedding, she called me a legend, but only for filing complaints when she stole my clothes. Her fiancé joked that I probably just sat behind a desk typing paperwork. The entire room laughed. No one corrected them, not even my mother. But I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I said 6 words, and suddenly, no one had anything to say. What happens when the forgotten sister holds more power than anyone in the room, and no one even knew it? The envelope was too white. That kind of white you only see in bridal magazines or on cake boxes. It shimmered faintly under the hallway light when I picked it up from the mail table, its rose gold trim catching just enough light to whisper, "You're lucky to be holding me." But when I turned it over, there was no name. No Cressida Monroe. No and guest. Just elegance and erasure. I slid a finger under the seal, careful not to tear the corner. Inside was a card so thick it probably cost more than my week's groceries. Join us in celebrating the engagement of Camille Monroe and Jonathan Pierce. That was it. Not even a scribbled note. Just a glossy declaration that love was happening, and I was apparently a footnote, if that. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Camille. "Hey sis, don't feel like you have to come if you're slammed. Also, don't wear anything too serious, okay? Jonathan's family is kinda uptight. Keep it fun." I stared at it, read it twice, then a third time just to make sure the sting was real. Don't wear anything too serious. Like my presence had the power to ruin the aesthetic. Like I was some kind of funeral in heels. I smiled, but it didn't touch anything inside. Camille never did learn how to insult without sounding helpful. She mastered the art of polished cruelty by age 12. I tucked the card back into the envelope and dropped it on my kitchen counter, next to an overdue electricity bill. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened the folder from my chambers. A sentencing memo, a juvenile case, a mother weeping on the stand. It reminded me that some people didn't get justice unless someone serious showed up. "She has no idea what serious looks like on me," I muttered, sipping. I pulled up the quote that lived on a post-it above my desk. "Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Camille never liked that I kept it framed. Said it was too grandmother core for my office. I closed my laptop and walked to my closet. I reached for the black dress. Not because it was slimming, not because it was easy, but because I wore black like armor. It didn't ask for permission. It didn't apologize. "I don't wear black to disappear," I said aloud to the silent room. "I wear it to be unmissable." As I pulled the garment from the hanger, my mind drifted. Quick, sharp images from childhood. Birthday parties I wasn't invited to, despite living in the same house. Camille practicing dance routines in the living room while I watched from the hallway. She'd apologize after, always with a laugh. "You wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway." My hotel reservation came next. I didn't even look at the one Camille had blocked off. I booked a place closer to downtown, one with a view of the city I'd fought to live in on my own terms. Then I ordered a card. White, understated, hand-lettered. I left it unsigned. "This time, I'm not going for her," I said, staring out the window. "Not for them. I'm going for the silence. I'm going to break it." I packed lightly. Black dress, 1 pair of heels, a folder with a few choice documents, just in case. My robe, pressed and folded, tucked neatly beside it. The irony wasn't lost on me. A judge's robe, next to a wedding guest's dress. 2 uniforms. 2 roles. Only one with authority. The morning of my flight, the sky in Austin was a flat blue. No clouds, no drama. I boarded early, found my seat by the window, and placed my carry-on beneath the one in front of me. As we taxied toward the runway, I closed my eyes. They don't expect me to come. They don't expect me to speak. They don't even expect me to be seen. But I'll be there, and that's the beginning. The drive from the airport to the villa was quiet. I watched the terrain change, flat highways folding into the curves of hill country. The wedding venue sat like a glass crown on a hill, all angles and ambition. Camille had always aimed for optics. This place practically screamed, "Look what I can make happen!" Except she didn't. Not alone. The valet didn't recognize me, which felt appropriate. Inside, I was greeted by a burst of floral perfume, soft laughter, and the crisp sting of chilled champagne. Blush-toned gowns sparkled under chandeliers. Everyone looked ready for a magazine cover shoot. I looked like I'd come from court. And in a way, I had. As I moved through the crowd, some people nodded. Others simply blinked past me. I wasn't surprised. Familiarity never guaranteed recognition in our family. I passed a table where the name tags were lined up like soldiers. Mine was missing. Of course it was. Before I could find a corner to stand in, the MC's voice rang out. Celine, Camille's friend from college, the one who ran her podcast about conscious luxury, stood near the stage, microphone in hand. "Let's welcome the bride's beautiful sister," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Cressida, right? Who works in administration." The pause wasn't accidental. The guess wasn't innocent. And from across the room, I caught Camille's expression. 1 part delight, 2 parts provocation. She turned to a group of guests and shrugged, palms up like, "What can I say?" I didn't flinch. I'd been mislabeled before, misnamed, misused. No one ever corrects a story that keeps you small, especially if it makes someone else look bigger. A little later, I hovered near the appetizer table, pretending to consider a canapé I didn't want. A man approached, mid-40s, tailored suit, ring so new it still caught too much light. "You're Camille's sister, right?" he asked. I nodded. He smiled, sipped his drink. "She said you work with the city, like records or something?" I tilted my head slightly. "Something like that." "That's cool," he said genuinely. "Stable. Must be nice just typing and filing. No stress, right?" I returned his smile. "Right. No stress." In my head, I was recalling last Tuesday, when I'd signed off on a case that sent a man to prison for corporate fraud. 3 years of investigation, 46 victims. But sure, call me a typist. From the other side of the room, I caught motion. Camille mimicking a typing gesture to one of her bridesmaids. Fingers moving in the air, like she was banging on a keyboard. Her friends giggled. One of them turned to glance at me, then quickly looked away. I didn't respond, didn't react. I took a small sip of champagne, let the bubbles settle on my tongue, and stared straight ahead. Dignity doesn't demand an audience. That's why mockery always needs a crowd. I moved away from the table, circling the perimeter of the room. Every inch of the space had Camille's touch. Rose centerpieces, framed engagement photos, customized cocktail napkins with their initials embossed in gold. Near the far end of the hall, past an oversized flower arrangement, I found a spot partially hidden from view. From there, I could see everyone, but no one looked back. Invisible, but present. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a pen, and made a quiet note on the back of my place card, the one I'd retrieved from a staff member's checklist. They had forgotten me. But I hadn't forgotten a thing. The most dangerous person at any party is the one you forget to watch. It was cooler near the floral wall, away from the heat of too many bodies in tailored suits and sequined dresses. I stood there, back straight, hands resting lightly on the small plate I hadn't touched, watching the celebration swirl like a snow globe I had never been a part of. My champagne glass stayed full. I wasn't here to toast. I leaned against the wall just enough to take the pressure off my heels. From this angle, I could see the whole room, people laughing too loud, servers moving with orchestrated grace, and Vera soaking up the attention like it was sunlight. It reminded me of something else, of being 17, of standing in the hallway of our house, envelope in hand, stomach tight. "Dad?" I had said, voice more excited than I'd let myself feel. I got in, Yale Law. He didn't look up, just kept eating. Mom was silent, eyes on her napkin. I waited, then handed the letter across the table. It sat there unopened for several seconds before he finally unfolded it. "Law?" he said, eyebrows lifting like I'd told him I wanted to become a magician. "That's not for women, Cressida. You know that. You should stay local, help your mother. We can't afford to lose your head to some East Coast fantasy." The paper drooped in his hand, and with it, something inside me. He never said congratulations, just folded it back up and pushed it aside. I blinked, refocusing on the wedding scene in front of me. The music had shifted to a slower jazz tempo. Couples began to drift toward the dance floor. I reached into my clutch again, fingers brushing the folded note I'd written on the plane. Just a sentence, really. Something I might leave behind when I walked out. I hadn't decided yet. A voice near the gift table caught my attention. "Did you hear what Camille did back in college? That nonprofit scholarship? So impressive." I turned slightly. The woman speaking wore a soft lavender dress and clutched a designer clutch too tightly. That scholarship had been mine. Or it should have been. Senior year, I had spent 3 months researching the intersection of juvenile sentencing and education access. My advisor had nominated me for a fellowship open to collaborative contributors, projects submitted by siblings, best friends, co-authors. Camille saw my draft on the dining table one night, asked what it was. I explained. She smiled and said, "That's cute." She submitted her own version 2 weeks later. Changed the title, tweaked the structure, sent it in with a recommendation letter from the same advisor, whom she had never met until the day she dropped by my class. I found out when the school newspaper listed her name as the award recipient. Camille Monroe, recognized for her deep commitment to youth justice. I still remember the photo. She wore my blazer. I swallowed the memory like a bitter pill. That kind of theft doesn't leave fingerprints, just echoes. I watched her now, gliding through the room, thanking guests, smiling at compliments that weren't earned. For years, I thought they had forgotten me, misplaced my name, left it off by mistake. But they hadn't forgotten. They remembered everything. I just wasn't included in the retelling. They didn't erase me, they overwrote me. A quiet laugh escaped from behind me. I turned to find a man in a gray jacket holding a glass of red wine. "Didn't you used to be the smart one?" he asked, smiling as if we were catching up at a reunion neither of us wanted to attend. I looked him dead in the eye. "I still am." He blinked, hesitated, then chuckled like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I wasn't. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I stepped back into the shadows, where I belonged, for now. As the man with the red wine disappeared into the blur of conversation and camera flashes, I made my way back to the table. The string quartet shifted into a slower tune, and servers began weaving through the crowd with small trays of chocolate-dusted something. My seat was still unclaimed, half-shadowed by a towering orchid centerpiece. I eased into it, let the glass of untouched champagne catch the light, and watched the stage. The MC tapped her mic with a practiced rhythm. "Now," she beamed, "let's hear from our beautiful bride." Phones came out like reflexes. Guests lifted them, already recording. I took a small sip, letting the chill settle behind my teeth. Vera glided onto the stage like she owned it, which, in many ways, she probably thought she did. Her dress sparkled like a warning flare. She held the mic with the kind of ease that comes from being adored for most of your life. "I just want to say thank you," she began, smile glowing. "Tonight feels like a dream. I mean, who would have thought little Camille would end up here?" "Not me." Laughter, scattered but loyal. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I wasn't always this polished, you know. Growing up, I was a little wild. My sister, Cressida, she was the responsible one, always correcting me, always following rules, filing complaints when I borrowed her sweaters." A ripple of laughter. My fingers stayed still on the stem of the glass. "She's a legend," Vera added, eyes sweeping the crowd with false humility. "Specializes in paperwork and principles." I didn't move, didn't blink. The weight of the room shifted slightly. Some guests glanced in my direction, some kept laughing. Vera didn't flinch. If I bleed, I thought, she'll turn that into a punchline too. She paused, turned toward the table where Jonathan, her fiancé, sat. He chuckled, leaned toward the mic. She probably spends all day typing reports, right? He said, voice smug. Government work? More laughter. A woman near me tapped her glass with her fork, as if to signal this was peak performance. Astria wasn't done. Important stuff like documentation, he added, grinning at the audience. I felt the moment settle like sediment at the bottom of a glass. This wasn't teasing. It was a coordinated display, a show, and I was the prop. Camera flashes captured Vera's smile. Somewhere in the back, someone clapped. I picked up my fork, not to eat, just to keep my hand from tightening too visibly. My entree sat untouched. Duck, maybe. Or chicken. It didn't matter. They want a reaction, I reminded myself. They want fire. Instead, I gave them ice. I kept my face neutral, a slight upward turn at the corner of my lips. I'd practiced this in court, watching opposing counsel try to rattle me with condescension or ignorance. I never let them see where it landed. They're building their scene, I thought, but they forgot I write my own scripts. The string quartet resumed. Vera curtsied like she'd just finished a Broadway monologue and returned to her seat amid applause. Jonathan kissed her cheek. I checked my watch. The time would come. I wasn't in a hurry. Some truths don't interrupt. They wait. Revenge is loud, I thought, watching them bask. Truth is colder. They wanted a story. I'll give them a sentence. The applause was still echoing in the hall when the laughter began. First in polite chuckles, then louder, more open. It rolled through the room like a slow tide. People were leaning back in their chairs, heads tilted, some wiping away tears, not from sentiment, but amusement. I didn't move. My eyes dropped to the plate in front of me. The duck, yes, definitely duck, had grown cold. The skin, once crisp, had gone limp under the steam of a conversation I never asked to be part of. My fork sat precisely parallel to the knife, hands resting calmly on the napkin folded in my lap. But underneath the table, my fingers curled slowly into the linen like they were gripping something firmer than fabric. Across the table, I saw her. Alawan, my mother. Her hand was over her mouth, like she was hiding a cough, or a laugh. I couldn't tell at first, but then she turned to Vera and gave her the smallest, most indulgent nod, like she was proud. There was no shame in her face, just approval. My mother never hit me, I thought, voice quiet inside my own skull. She just laughed when others did. A group of Vera's college friends passed by, one stopping to touch her arm. "You should do stand-up," the woman said, grinning. "You were hilarious." Vera leaned into the attention with all the grace of someone who expected it. Jonathan wrapped an arm around her waist. Astria, cool, unbothered, sipped his drink like nothing had happened. Like nothing needed to be acknowledged. I scanned the room. No one was looking at me now. The ones who had laughed were busy pretending they hadn't. The ones who hadn't laughed were too uncomfortable to meet my eyes. When they cheer your humiliation, the family portrait becomes a crime scene. I lifted the champagne glass and brought it to my lips. Held it there for a second too long. I didn't drink. I just wanted to feel the chill press against my skin. I could hear them talking, Vera's voice, always a notch too loud when she knew she had the room. Guests continued to orbit her like she was the bride, the star, the story. And maybe she was. She'd certainly written this one, directed it, cast me as the stiff, humorless foil to her sparkling charm. She'd rehearsed her lines, coached her fiancé, even had the timing right. It was a perfect scene, except I wasn't reading from her script. I didn't clench, didn't cry, didn't flee. There's an elegance in not reacting. It terrifies people more than anger ever could. Because silence, when it's intentional, doesn't look weak. It looks surgical. I set the glass down with a quiet clink against the table. The sound was barely louder than the hum of conversation, but it was enough. It was a marker. They taught me to be quiet. They forgot to teach me how loud truth can be. Let them laugh. I know what happens next. Not long after the string quartet picked up again, the lights dimmed and a large projection screen came to life behind the dance floor. Guests quieted, shifting in their seats as images flickered on. Soft, focused childhood photos of Vera, her first ballet recital, high school prom, family vacations to Destin. A few people let out sentimental sighs. Others chuckled at the more candid shots. A slideshow curated to perfection. Then came the video segment. Short clips of friends and family congratulating the couple, sharing memories. Her college roommate gave a teary toast from a coffee shop. Jonathan's brother filmed his from what looked like a hotel room. Even their old neighbor from across the street sent something in. Ilawan appeared too, sitting by a window, reciting a half-memorized message with a frozen smile. My name never came up. Not even once. When the video ended, applause broke out. The MC returned with the same plastic smile she'd worn all evening. Let's give a round of applause to everyone who contributed such heartfelt messages to the montage, especially Camille, who organized the whole thing herself. That part didn't surprise me. Vera's always preferred stories she controls. What did surprise me was how fast it happened. The cut. So clean. I had submitted my segment weeks ago, a minute-long clip I recorded after hours in my chambers. Just a simple message about love, integrity, and the weight of marriage. I'd worn a navy blouse, minimal makeup, sincere, professional, civil. I approached the event planner at the bar under the pretense of asking about the restroom. She smiled, overly sweet. I kept my tone flat. I noticed my video wasn't included, I said, tilting my head. Was there a tech issue? Her eyes flicked. Oh, she said too quickly. No. Camille made a few edits to match the tone she wanted. Yours was more formal, I think? Of course, I said. They didn't delete me. They curated me out. I thanked her and stepped away. Half an hour later, while I was standing near a pair of tall floral columns, I heard a guest complimenting Elowen's necklace, a delicate string of emeralds I'd spent weeks selecting last December. It's beautiful, the woman said. Camille has such taste. She said she found it on a trip to Santa Fe? Elowen laughed softly. She did. She knows me well. I didn't correct her. I had chosen that necklace myself, ordered it from a designer in Asheville, had it wrapped with a handwritten note. For the version of you who still remembers? She never acknowledged it. No call, no text. I only knew it arrived because the tracking number said so. Now, hearing her give the credit to Vera so casually, so proudly, I felt the same familiar fracture deepen. 2 erasures in one evening, one on video, the other around her neck. When your own blood edits you out, you stop wondering if it's accidental. You just stop. I slipped away, unnoticed, weaving through the side hallway toward the powder room. The mirror above the sink was framed in brass, too ornate, too gold. I stared at it anyway. I looked tired, but composed. You can't fight shadows, I whispered. You have to step into the light. And just like that, something inside me locked into place. The next scene. I write. I rinsed my hands slowly, let the water run longer than necessary, then dried them with deliberate care. When I stepped out of the powder room and back into the main hall, the string lights outside had begun to glow. The sky through the floor-to-ceiling windows was softening into that pre-dusk gold Texas does so well. Vera's laughter echoed faintly through the courtyard. I walked toward the bar to retrieve another glass, not because I wanted to drink, but because it gave me somewhere to go that didn't involve pretending to belong. That's when I heard him, mid-50s, red-cheeked, too loud for his own good. Can you believe Jonathan's family gifted this whole estate? He said to no one in particular, sloshing his bourbon as he gestured around. They must really love Camille. My fingers gripped the rim of the glass tighter than I meant to. I hadn't realized I'd stopped breathing until I heard the soft exhale escape my chest. This estate, this glass-encased monument to curated happiness. It wasn't a gift from Jonathan's family. It wasn't even new. I knew because I'd bought it. 3 years ago, when our mother had her second health scare, Camille suggested we invest in peace, said Elowen deserved a retirement home that didn't look like grief. She found the property. I paid for it. The title, the maintenance, the renovations. My name signed every dotted line. And now it was the backdrop to a lie wrapped in vows. I set the glass down untouched and moved across the room. The event planner stood near the gift table, checking something on her clipboard. I approached her calmly. I overheard someone mention the estate was a wedding gift, I said, not raising my voice. Just wanted to clarify. She blinked, then smiled in that overly rehearsed way people do when they realize they've stepped into something bigger than the dress code. Oh, yes. Camille told us it was gifted from her fiancé's family, she said quickly. She called it their inheritance launch party. It's beautiful, isn't it? Lovely, I said. Thank you. I walked away, not because I was finished, but because I wasn't about to unravel in front of staff. She used what I bought to celebrate herself and buried me under it. Back at my table, I stared down at the linen napkin folded into a rose. My fingers ached, not from rage, but from restraint. My mind slid backward. 2 years ago, reading over the estate documents after our father's passing. The language was clear. Both daughters, equal share. Our father's final nod to balance. Camille and I co-owners of the family trust. But a year later, I got a call from his former attorney. Quiet. Hesitant. Your sister and your mother revised the deed, he said. I was obligated to file it. You're no longer on it. I remember sitting at my desk in chambers, robe still on, staring at the blinking cursor in a sentencing document. The lines blurred. I didn't contest it. I told myself I had my own life, my own salary, my own home. I didn't need to fight over legacy with a woman who rewrote it in her sleep. But tonight, they were throwing a party on bones they pulled from me and called it a gift. Inheritance isn't about money, it's about belonging. And they didn't just leave me out of the will, they left me out of the story. I stood, walked past the gift table, past the laughing guests, and out the double doors toward the valet lot. My car was parked farther down, under the oaks. I opened the back seat, reached under the passenger chair, and pulled out a leather folder. Inside, the original deed, notarized, copies of title records, a printout of the revised version, every dotted line Camille had tried to hide under rose petals and champagne. This house may echo her laughter today, but tomorrow it will remember who paid for its silence. I returned to the hall with the folder tucked back under my coat, my heels clicking softer now, as if even the floor understood something had shifted. The air inside was warmer, heavier. Laughter floated in waves, another toast in progress. I moved toward the dessert table, hoping for a second of neutral ground. That's when I felt a tug at my sleeve. A girl, maybe 7, dressed in pink tulle and plastic pearls, looked up at me with eyes wide and honest. Are you one of the people working here? Her mother, just a few feet away, hadn't noticed. The girl's question wasn't cruel. It was curious, innocent. I bent down, met her gaze without a smile. No, sweetheart, I said gently. But that's a fair question today. She blinked, nodded like I'd confirmed her hypothesis, and skipped back to her plate of melting ice cream. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked back toward my table. But I didn't sit. I stood behind the chair, fingers brushing the rim of the wineglass, watching the room like it was a chessboard I'd already memorized. Silence is not diplomacy. It's self-erasure when repeated too long. They wanted me small. They wanted me unseen. They dressed it up as elegance and called it grace. Vera clinked her glass again. The room quieted, obedient. She stood, poised for another round of carefully curated memories and sugary self-praise. Her voice rang with false modesty, hands gesturing as if she were holding court. That's when I stepped forward. One step, then another. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clear my throat. I simply spoke. I'm a judge. That was all. A stillness fell that no music could cut through. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died mid-word. The ripple was immediate. Not dramatic, but surgical. Vera froze mid-sentence, her mouth parted slightly. Her laugh didn't arrive. Jonathan turned, brow furrowed. "Wait! What?" From the left, a voice whispered too loudly to be subtle. "Judge Monroe? The Eastman trial?" Another guest gasped. Someone fumbled their phone onto the tablecloth. I could feel eyes pressing against my skin like a sudden spotlight. Vera blinked fast, tried to recover. "You never mentioned. You were still doing that." I tilted my head slightly. "No one asked." Astria, usually so smooth, suddenly looked like a man who'd underestimated the weather and left his umbrella behind. The guest 2 tables down leaned toward her husband. She handled that sentencing. You remember? The financial case. Made the news for how sharp she was. And then came the clicks. Phones pulled up under napkins, names entered into search bars. The buzz of quiet recognition replacing the hum of party chatter. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I simply turned and walked toward the floral arch, past people who suddenly saw me in high definition. At the edge of the hall, the string quartet stopped playing mid-passage. They didn't know why. Maybe no one told them. Or maybe they, too, felt the shift. I picked up my clutch from the chair I'd never fully occupied, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and made for the door. The trial just began. And for once, I get to judge. There was a pause in the air, so dense you could feel it sitting on your chest. Not a gasp, not even a breath. Just the weight of stunned recognition settling over the room like a slow fog. A waiter near the cake table dropped a spoon. It clattered against the floor, too loud, too sharp. Still, no one laughed. No one moved. A woman near the back whispered just loud enough for those around her to hear. "Judge Monroe? From the news?" I stood still. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't soften the blow. I let the words hang there, untouched and undeniable. From across the room, I watched Jonathan. He looked from Vera to me and back again. His hand, which had been resting gently on Vera's lower back, dropped like dead weight. He stepped slightly away from her, not consciously, but enough. The man who laughed when I was a punchline had just lost the setup. Vera was the first to break the silence. Her voice came out a pitch too high, brittle at the edges. "Well," she said, blinking quickly. She never liked to talk about her job, so I didn't even know she was still doing that. It was weak. Everyone could hear it. Even she knew. From the table closest to the bar, another voice chimed in, this time steadier, firmer. "She sentenced my cousin in 2019. Eastman family. It was all over the papers." Vera's face shifted. Just a flicker. A crack in the perfect shell. That was all it took. Conversations restarted, but not in the same tone. Whispers replaced jokes. People who had laughed now looked down at their plates. The ones who hadn't spoken at all now glanced at me with a new kind of consideration. Not awe, not admiration, respect, guilt. A man who'd barely acknowledged me earlier offered a polite nod. A woman near the champagne bar leaned into her friend and whispered, "She doesn't just show up. She walks in like the room was waiting." I reached for my coat, which was folded neatly over the back of the chair I never sat in. The weight of it grounded me. My glass, still nearly full, sat undisturbed on the table. I left it there. It wasn't a toast I'd ever needed. As I walked past Vera, I didn't break stride, but I leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. "You wrote your version," I said softly. "I just spoke mine." She didn't respond. Couldn't. Outside, the garden was quiet. The path was lined with tea lights, flickering gently in the evening breeze. I walked slowly, heels clicking against stone, the rhythm steady, deliberate. Halfway to the car, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I kept walking until I reached the driver's side, slid in, closed the door. Then I looked at the screen. 2 texts, one from Elowen, another from Vera. Elowen's read, "Call me." Vera's, "You could have warned me." I stared at them for a long moment. Funny how truth only feels like betrayal when it's inconvenient. Inside, the silence hadn't really lifted. Not entirely. There were voices, yes, but they were subdued now, softer, careful. Like everyone was suddenly aware they might be overheard, or worse, misunderstood. The seating chart Vera had designed down to napkin colors was unraveling. Guests weren't returning to their assigned spots. They were lingering in corners, exchanging theories like it was a courtroom sidebar. But they weren't talking about the cake or the playlist anymore. They were talking about me. Jonathan had quietly stepped away. I saw him from the window as I crossed the garden, standing under one of the string lights, hands shoved into his pockets. The groom, absent from his own reception. Vera stood frozen at her table, eyes fixed on the untouched tower of macarons, one of many things tonight that now felt too sweet, too staged. Back inside, someone noticed the folder I'd left. Dark leather, simple clasp. It had rested on the white chair I never sat in, left like an afterthought or a warning. One of Jonathan's aunts picked it up, hesitated, then opened it with slow fingers. Inside was the Eastman decision. My signature on the bottom of the verdict. Behind it, a clipped page from the Tribune. Judge Monroe, justice without spotlight. The photo showed me in profile, outside the courthouse, mid-step. Serious, focused, no filters, no smile. The folder made its way from hand to hand, each person more hushed than the last. No one commented. They didn't need to. It was Seraphine, sitting alone near the back, who finally broke the silence. "She changed my niece's life," she said aloud, not loudly, but with certainty. "That courtroom, she didn't just rule, she listened. She gave her a way forward." No one interrupted. One man near the fireplace bowed his head slightly. Someone else murmured, "That's who she is." And Vera sat in the middle of it all, scrolling on her phone like she was trying to find a version of the internet that didn't already know. I saw her lips move, a whisper to no one. How did I not know? But she did know. She just never asked. Across the room, Elowen sat stiffly, her wineglass untouched. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers wrapped tightly around the emerald necklace, the one she told everyone Vera had gifted her. Her gaze didn't meet anyone's, but she wasn't looking at me either. Just the floor. Finally, her voice came out, soft, brittle. "That was from her." She didn't finish the sentence. Back outside, the night had cooled slightly. I walked into the lobby of the hotel I'd booked on my own terms. No group rate, no shared suite. I checked in, thanked the clerk, and took the elevator to the top floor. The hallway was quiet. My heels barely made a sound on the carpet as I reached my room, card key blinking green. Inside, everything was still, controlled. I slipped off my coat, set my clutch down, and sat on the edge of the bed. No anger, no victory, just space. They didn't need to apologize. I didn't leave for sorry, I left for space. The next morning, I returned briefly. The wedding cleanup had begun, florists repacking centerpieces, catering staff breaking down the buffet. It wasn't about sentiment. I'd left something, my folder, my name. A soft breeze moved through the courtyard, carrying the scent of wilting roses and yesterday's champagne. They were setting up for the family portraits, a staged conclusion, more performance than memory. I stood near the edge of the lawn, watching. Elowen caught sight of me and gave a small wave. She said something to the photographer, then looked away. No one called me forward. They lined up. Vera in the center, Jonathan beside her, their hands linked like a logo. My father stood proudly near them, his shoulders square, his suit impeccable. No one turned to check if I was coming, so I didn't. I stayed behind the arbor, hands clasped, letting the scene play out like a movie I'd once auditioned for and been recast from. Someone took a step toward me. A cousin, maybe, I couldn't place her name. But she hesitated, saw that I wasn't moving, and stopped herself. I heard the photographer say, "Big smiles, let's do one just with parents and the bride." The shutter clicked. It was not forgetfulness. It was choreography. Later, as guests gathered for final toasts, Callistus tapped the microphone. The crowd quieted, though this time it felt less like attention and more like politeness. "I just want to say," he began, "how proud I am of Camille, and how grateful I am to Jonathan's family for welcoming her with such open arms. She's always been a light in this family, a source of joy, and—" I stopped listening. He never stumbled, never looked for me in the crowd. My name wasn't missed. It was excised with care. They didn't forget me. They curated around me. A few minutes later, as people clinked glasses and began drifting toward their cars, a woman I vaguely recognized leaned in and whispered, "It must be hard, being the quiet one." I turned my head slowly, met her eyes. "It's easier than being the blind one." She blinked, unsure if she should laugh or apologize. I saved her the trouble and walked away. Inside, the hall was half empty. I walked past the empty chairs, past the polished silver and the half-eaten cake, until I reached the reception table where my folder still lay. No one had touched it. I picked it up, tucked it under my arm, and turned back. As I passed Vera, she looked up. Her eyes met mine, but there was nothing behind them. Not anger, not guilt. Just a quiet, desperate need for this to be over. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I used to think closure came from apologies. Turns out, it comes from walking away without needing one. The coffee at the hotel was terrible, but I drank it anyway. I sat in the corner of the lobby with my coat draped over my arm, watching the quiet shuffle of guests checking out, staff clearing breakfast trays, and one man asking the concierge about lost sunglasses. Normalcy. It felt strangely luxurious. I scrolled through my phone. Messages from Elowen sat unread, still marked with a blue dot. Another from Vera arrived just minutes earlier. "You could have warned me." And the one before that. "Do you feel good about embarrassing us like that?" I deleted them both. The elevator chimed behind me, and I looked up instinctively. Seraphine stepped out, the same older woman from the reception, elegant in a navy coat, silver hair swept into a clip. She carried herself with intention, not urgency. She saw me and changed direction without pause. "I didn't want to interrupt yesterday," she said softly, resting one hand gently on my shoulder. "But I remember you." Her voice had the weight of someone who knew how to use silence as punctuation. "I'm not one to keep up with the courts, but I was there for the Eastman case. My niece, she was on the victim list. Small business owner, wiped out. You gave her back more than restitution. You gave her dignity." I felt something loosen in my chest. "She said you listened. Even when the lawyers postured and the cameras circled, you never flinched." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you." There was nothing rehearsed in her face. No polite flattery. Just the kind of acknowledgement that doesn't need to be shouted to be heard. Sometimes you don't need the whole room to see you. Just the one who mattered. We parted without ceremony. She didn't ask for a photo. I didn't ask her name again. Later that morning, I loaded my bag into the trunk of the rental, GPS already set for Austin. The drive was long, but it didn't feel like retreat. It felt like direction. A return to something that hadn't needed anyone else's permission. As I crossed the county line, the familiar outline of the courthouse came into view. Its brick facade slightly weathered, the flag outside catching the breeze just enough to ripple. I slowed as I passed, glancing at the steps where I'd stood dozens of times. Never for attention, only for duty. They erased me from family photos, but they'll never remove me from the bench. Back at Chambers, the office smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. I set my bag down, shrugged off my coat, and sat at my desk. There, on top of a neat stack of files, was a plain white envelope. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside, a handwritten card on simple linen paper. Thank you for being a judge who listens. I didn't recognize the handwriting. There was no signature, just that one sentence. I held it for a moment longer than necessary, then placed it into the top right drawer, the one labeled Keep. They never asked who I was, but now they'll never forget.